Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today it is time for me to put my knowledge of fantasy to the test. I'm going to be looking at a Reddit list today of the top fantasy books of the 21st century. This was inspired by a New York Times article that came out, which was the top 100 books of the 21st century so far, and it wasn't just fantasy. So I clearly didn't want to just do that list because I probably wouldn't have read any of them, to be honest. And I have heard some criticisms from people who are more well-rounded readers than I am, but I wanted to do just a focused fantasy list. And so I was like, well, does one exist? I looked up, and there are several lists out there. Goodreads has one, but it was published in 2008, which I think it needs to be updated. Just a little, wink, wink, nod, nod, Goodreads. And there was also one from Powell Books, one from NPR, but that was sci-fi and fantasy. And then there was another one from, I think it was The Guardian. And I didn't like the culmination or like the process of any of them. And so I decided to go with Reddit because Reddit always has communities, especially within fantasy. So I went in and I just looked for the Reddit question of the top, like the 21st century fantasy books. And there was actually a Reddit option that featured the article that I was talking about in the New York Times. And so I thought it was going to be fun. They essentially just asked people for their top 10 fantasy books. So what I have done for you guys, and I've already done it in this process, so this is the future me, but I have looked through lists of people's comments to figure out whether or not I have read them, if I like them, disliked them, if I haven't read them, am I interested in reading them, and am I not interested in reading them. And then what we're going to do at the end is we're going to talk through my stats that I collect, the percentages of each of those categories, whether or not I agree with the lists, and we're going to talk about some other kind of fun things within the fantasy genre, some things that I just kind of want to add in. So I'm going to send you to Past Me, and you're going to see my reactions to the different comments that were on that Reddit post. If you guys are interested in looking through any more of those comments, I will put a link to that article in the description down below. Okay guys, so this is the list that I found on Reddit and kind of the description, the New York Times top 100 best books of the 21st century and kind of what it was inspired by. And so I just want to go through the comments and see what people's top 10 lists were and see how close I get to, well, I don't really have a goal in mind. I guess I just want to know, like, am I well versed in what the interwebs think are the best 100 fantasy books? So each person is supposed to, I haven't looked yet, they're supposed to only reply with their top 10 fantasy books. And I am just going to mark whether or not I have read and liked it, read and disliked it, whether or not I read or I haven't read and I'm still interested, or I have read and I'm not interested. And I will say that I'm not trying to add to my TBR. So I'm going to say if I haven't heard of a book that I just haven't read it and I am not interested in it, if I do mention any of these books that I haven't heard of that you want to let me know in the comments that I should absolutely read, please do that. But that's not the purpose of the stats that I'm keeping in this video. And then I guess at the end, I will give you guys a synopsis of like my percentages, whether or not I'm disappointed in myself, if I feel like I agree with a lot of these lists. So yeah, we're just going to kind of see. I also will say that as I go through the comments, I'm not going to be looking at the replies to the comments. I'm just going to look at the original comments, which ones have had the most like votes, the most upvotes. And those are the ones that I'm going to look at. So I'm going to look at the top 10 comments, not the replies to the comments, to get my list. I don't know how this is going to work as far as repeats go. So we'll see. Maybe I'll do, more than 10 comments if I feel like there's a ton of repeats, but I might not. And then I might just go through and see how many, unique recommendations or unique fantasy books were mentioned and give you guys a percentage at the end. So we'll see. I've got my numbers up on the screen. Let's dive into this list and see. So I know that there's a long little story here at the beginning, so I'm just going to scroll down the first comment. So Memories of Ice by Stephen Erickson, I'm going to assume is a Malazan book. And I haven't read Malazan and I haven't marked it off. Like it is something that I am considering reading, but I am a little intimidated by it. So I'm going to mark that as a book that I haven't read, but I am interested in. A Storm of Swords, I've heard of, but I'm not interested in reading it. I have read, I don't remember how many of the Game of Thrones books that I've read, but I did stop and I'm not going to continue with the series. Words of Radiance, I have read and I liked it. I love Brandon Sanderson books. Not all of them, but Words of Radiance is one that I enjoyed. The Heroes by Abercrombie, I am interested in, but I haven't read it yet. I've only read The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie, and it is amazing if you haven't read it. Dark Age by Pierce Brown, haven't heard of. Liza Blackamora is freaking fantastic. So that's another one that I have read and have loved. Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan. I don't know if I'm thinking of the right book. I want to check out that author at some point in time, but I don't recognize that book name. And so I'm going to say that I haven't read it and I'm not interested. King of Thorns by Mark Lawrence. The only book by Mark Lawrence, or books by Mark Lawrence, that I have read is the Library series, The Book That Wouldn't Burn and The Book That Broke the World, and I absolutely loved it. So I do absolutely want to check out Mark Lawrence's backlist, but I don't have that particular book on my TBR yet. So following the rules that I set at the beginning of this, I'm going to say unread and uninterested. Name of the Wind, I have read and I have loved. Wrath by John Gwynne, I know that that's part of the Faithful and the Fallen series, which I am making my way through. So unread, but still interested. Okay, on to comment number 2. So I know these are just replies. So I'm going to skip the replies and then go into the next list. So the first book in this list is not very promising for me. So Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell was a DNF. So read and disliked. I am going to count DNFs as read, just because I have given them a try and they just weren't for me. So read and disliked. Blade of Taishal, I have not read and haven't heard of. Same thing with the Unholy Counselet. A Storm of Swords, it's a repeat from the one above. Kashil's Dart, I've heard of, but I don't know anything about it. So I'm not really interested. Baru Cormorant, I have read, but I haven't read The Tyrant. But I am interested in continuing. That one I'm considering. So I've only read The Traitor. And the ending was a little heartbreaking. Well, I mean, the whole book was heartbreaking. So I haven't decided whether or not I want to continue, but it is like still on my TBR. So I'm going to say I haven't read it, but I am still interested. Horror of the Ninth, I have just gotten into this series, Locked Tomb series, and I'm really enjoying it. So Horror is definitely on my list to want to read, but I haven't gotten to it yet. Saint Death's Daughter, I haven't heard of. Black Leopard, Red Wolf, I have heard of, but I'm not interested. In Between Two Fires is on my list to get to because I have loved Christopher Buehlman. I really liked The Black Tongue Thief, and so I do want to get into more of his works. Okay, on to list number 3. I think so far we only have one repeat, so we'll see. Okay, list number 3. And oh my gosh, A Storm of Swords is on this again. So it's the second repeat, but the third time that book has been mentioned. Impressive. Uprooted is one that's on my list, but I haven't read it yet. The 5th season I have read and did really like. Circe, I'm not interested in. Liza Blackamora, we have our second repeat. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, we have our third repeat. Peridot Street Station, I haven't read, I'm not interested in. The Magicians, I've heard of, but I'm not interested in. The Poppy War, I read that one and disliked it. If you guys have seen Battle of the Booktubers, don't come at me. The Raven Tower, I've heard of, but I'm not interested. Okay, list number 4. Are we on number 4? I'm going to have to go back. I'm going to lose count as we go through these. Oh my goodness, this person put descriptions. So Lord of Emperors, I don't know what that is. The Bone Clocks, don't know what that is either. I mean, this is a great place to get recommendations, guys, if you are looking for some more fantasy. The Scar, ooh, I haven't heard of that either. Annihilation, would I consider Annihilation fantasy? I mean, I guess it's not my list, so I'll just go with what's listed on here. I'm not going to try and judge. Annihilation, I read. Did I like it or did I dislike it? I gave it 3 stars. It was kind of in the middle for me, but I'm gonna put it in the dislike category because the jury's kinda still out. Um, Mainly because I don't know where it's gonna go, and it will really depend on the end of the series, whether or not I enjoy it. Midnight Tides is a Malazan book. I was gonna say, pretty sure with that author, it's probably a Malazan, which I haven't tried, and I don't remember what I said in the first comment on whether or not I was gonna put these in interested or not interested, but I'll just do whatever I did in the first comment. The Gray House I am interested in. It's described to be super weird, but I haven't gotten to it yet. American Gods I've heard of, but I don't really think that one's for me. Pure Nessie I absolutely loved. Did this person only list 10? I just want to make sure I don't get more than 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, okay. They only listed 10. Okay. I just want to make sure they definitely spread theirs out more because of their descriptions. So Pure Nessie, I have read and liked. I wish I could read that book again for the first time. It was absolutely fantastic. The next one I haven't heard of. And then House of Suns, I also haven't heard of. I also will say, as I'm going through these, since some of these books I haven't heard of before, I am not fact checking these. So if they're not in the 21st century, sorry, once again, it's not my list. I'm just going off of what I'm being given. Okay, on to I think the 5th list. Oh my gosh, A Storm of Swords again. Okay, that's insane. The Scar, I think that's another repeat. The Etch City, haven't heard of it. The Sorcerer of Wild Deeps, haven't heard of it. 5th season, that's another repeat. The Winged Histories, haven't heard of it. Piranesi's a repeat. The Sunken Land Begins to Rise Again, haven't heard of it. Hair of the Ninth is another repeat. Leech, once again, not sure I would consider that fantasy, but it is on my want to read list. So I'm going to say that I am interested in that book. Okay, on to list number 6. I think at this point, since we've had so many repeats, I probably will do 11 or 12 different comments. So we'll see. Going Postal. I don't know if that's part of the Discworld series. The only Discworld I've read is whichever one was the first one published. And I don't know that I'm interested in continuing any further. So I'm going to say not interested, even though I know Terry Pratchett is absolutely adored. The Sorcerer's House, haven't heard of. Jonathan Strange, another repeat. Fire Song, not interested. Way of the Kings, I'm glad The Way of Kings was at least mentioned in one of these lists. I was going to be sad if it wasn't. I absolutely love Stormlight. So yes, have read and loved. The Bone Hunters, which is also a Malazan book. Haven't read it. And I'll put it in whatever category I said originally. That's bad. I can't remember. I know I said I was intimidated, but I can't remember if I said I was interested or not interested. It is like, I feel like I should read it because I know people, I'm a little scared because if I don't like it, I know Malazan fans are a little intense, but anyway, Note of the Ninth, I do want to read that one. Sword of Destiny, I have not heard of it, so I'll put that in the not interested category. The Blade itself, I love seeing Joe Abercrombie on this list, so yes, I have liked or loved. I really loved The Blade itself. My favorite book in that trilogy was the second book, but still. And I haven't heard of this Garth Nix. Okay, on to the 7th list. Although this person didn't list 10. So I think I might skip theirs and go on to the next one. See, some of these people aren't listing 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, this person listed 10. I'm skipping around, and I know that we have some repeats, so maybe it won't matter, but I've just made up these generic rules, so you know. A Feast for Crows, A Storm of Swords again. Oh my goodness. I can't believe that has made so many lists. I would say I'm not interested in either of those. The third one I haven't heard of. Night's Watch, I know is Discworld, and it is one that a lot of people have recommended to me, but I just think at this point in time, I'm not going to read any more of the Discworld books. The Other Wind, I haven't heard of. Foundry Side, I'm interested, or I'm glad to see that Foundry Side is represented. Robert Jackson Bennett, I think his worlds are fantastic. So I have read and liked that book. Best Served Cold is on my TBR, but I haven't gotten to it yet. Haven't heard of Lahore du Contrevent. The Man Who Spoke Snakish, I haven't heard of, and the last one I haven't heard of either. Okay, the next one we have The Name of the Wind, and I can't remember if this was mentioned before. If not, I would be surprised if it hasn't been mentioned before, but I have read and liked this one. Another Stephen Erickson, The Way of Kings is definitely a repeat. Ghostwater, haven't heard of. Storm of Sword again. Oh my goodness. Lies of Locke Lamora again. Dungeon Crawler Carl is on my TBR. The Hero of Ages. So that's the first time Mistborn's been mentioned, which I am surprised, but I did love that. Age of Empire. It's by Michael Sullivan, so I'm going to say I'm interested. I think I know the cover of this book. Is it the one with the big tree on it? I think it's just a series I haven't gotten to yet. I don't recognize the name of the book, but I know that a lot of Michael J. Sullivan is on my backlist. And then I've never heard of Stone of Tears. Okay, so I've done 10 lists, so I'm going to do one more. Actually, I might do two more just to see if I can get a solid 100. I didn't want to take forever to record this, and so I didn't sit there and count how many, but hopefully if we do two more, we'll get close to 100. So Night Watch is a repeat. Man, we've had a lot of repeats, which is good. A lot of Stephen Erickson. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, that's also a repeat. I think this is also, the Jonathan Stroud is also a repeat. The Way of Kings is also a repeat. Maybe I'll have to do another one. The Brightness, Long Ago. I haven't heard of that, so I'm going to say I'm not interested. Going Postal, not interested. Midnight Tides, not interested. Coraline, I have read and I did like. Dead House Gates is another Stephen Erickson, so whatever category I keep putting him into, see what the next list brings. I'm really surprised that Between Two Fires has been on two lists because I don't hear many people talk about Christopher Buehlman, so I am happy because I have enjoyed him in the past. Vita Nostra, I am surprised to see on somebody's list. Now, granted, these are the lists that are down in the comments, and so they haven't been voted up very many times, but still, I'm pleasantly surprised to see Vita Nostra on the list. I did like that book. Midnight Tides, I think, is a repeat. Under Heaven, haven't heard of it. The Hike, haven't heard of it. Is it Acacia or Acacia? Haven't heard of it. The Blade itself is a repeat. The Night Circus. I was wondering if Morgenstern was going to make an appearance on these lists. I am not going to read Morgenstern again. I read The Starless Sea and did not enjoy it at all. So I just think that their writing is just not for me. Going Postal is a repeat. Okay, A Psalm for the Wild Built. Once again, not sure if that's fantasy, but if we're just going off the list, I have read and I did really like that book. And let's do one more just to try and get that 100 if I can, which I don't think I'm going to at this point in time with all of the repeats. Between Two Fires again. House of Leaves. Once again, don't know if I would consider that a fantasy. I have not read that. I am interested, but it is very intimidating. A Storm of Swords again. That's crazy. The Heroes, I think that's a repeat. Wow, there is no, I don't even know how to pronounce that word, but anti-mimics or anti-memetics division. I have heard this. I've had this book recommended to me before, and it is on my want to read list. I just haven't gotten to it yet. Piranesi is a repeat. 11/22/63, I definitely wouldn't consider a fantasy, but once again, if we're going off of this list, I would say read and liked. Children of Ruin, I do want to read, but have not yet. Another Annihilation, another Dungeon Crawler Carl, and The Wanderers I haven't heard of. Okay, one more, just because I saw the name, this specific name at the top of this list, and I just have to. Okay, this will be my last one, I promise. So The Curse of, is it Shalian? Is a repeat. The Goblin Emperor, yes, I have read it and I loved it. Uprooted, I think, is a repeat. Heart of the Ninth is a repeat. Sunshine, haven't heard of it. The Hands of the Emperor, haven't heard of it. The Empress of Salt and Fortune, interesting. That's an interesting pick. I have read that. I'm going to put that in the read and disliked, even though I just thought it was okay. I gave it 3 stars, and it's a cute little short story. I just don't think it did exactly what I wanted. But I think if it's something that you're interested in, the storylines if you are interested in the storyline, I do think you should give it a try. The Sign of the Dragon, haven't heard of, and Odd Magic, I haven't heard of, and I haven't heard of the last one either. So, oh wait, I've heard of that author, but not that series. So, okay, we shall tally all of them. I know you guys have been keeping up with me on screen and what all of my numbers are, and I will let you guys know like what my percentages and everything are in just a minute. Okay, so you are back with me now, and you have seen the results of all of the different categories. So I have some percentages, and I have like actually calculated how many books we actually got through. So we ended up going through 12 different lists. We had 88 books total. So I didn't get to my 100, but that's because we had 22 books that repeated at least once. We had several books that repeated multiple times. The top book on that list as far as repeats go, A Storm of Swords by R.R. Martin, was repeated 7 times, which is absolutely insane. Out of those repeats, out of the 22 books that were repeated by people, I've read 7 of them, and I'm interested in 5 of them. So over half of the books that were repeated by multiple people, I'm interested in. As far as the percentage of my read and liked and all the categories that I created, so I had 15 of the total books I had read and liked, so that was 17%. 4 of them I read and disliked, which I'm happy that number is low, and that was 4.5%. 20 of them I was interested in, but I haven't read them yet. That was 22.7%. And 49 of them I have not read and I'm not interested in. So the 22.7% is, I think I like that percentage, because that essentially means that there are a whole bunch of books on this list that there were a lot of books on the not read but interested books that were later on in series. And I feel like if I add together the top 3 categories, those are the books that, you know, I've either read or I'm still interested in. And so I do feel like I'm a little bit like in touch with the interwebs. However, those categories add up to less than 50%. It's a little bit more than 44% of the books that I looked at are books that are on my view, like I have them in my mind, and a whole bunch of the other ones I hadn't heard of, because that's the majority of the books I put in the uninterested category are books that I hadn't heard of. And some of that is I've heard of the authors, I just haven't heard of the series, which is fine, but I didn't want to add a whole bunch of books to my TBR today. And once again, if you guys do or did see a book on the list that you really think I need to give a shot that I hadn't heard of, please shout that book out in the comments. I would love to add more to my TBR, but I wasn't going to do the research throughout my reactions. So, am I happy with my numbers? I really thought about it at the beginning that I really wanted at least 50% of them to be books that I was aware of and liked, which I definitely didn't hit that. But I do think that I'm okay. I'm okay with my numbers. I do think that that's 44-ish% is a pretty significant number for just random people on the internet and books that I am aware of or am wanting to read. And so I'm okay. But I definitely am not as well versed in fantasy as I would have assumed. Which brings me to a couple of things I want to talk to you guys about. One, the authors on my shelves that I own. For those of you who are new here, I only buy books that I have absolutely loved. So most of the books on my shelves, there are very few books on my shelves that I haven't read. And so most of them are books that I bought after reading them. And the authors on my shelves that were in the comments that I have loved since I own them, I have Patrick Rothfuss. I specifically have The Name of the Wind on my shelves. You can't see it because it's on like my very, very top shelf. I also have John Gwynne over here. I don't have Wrath, which was the book that was mentioned, but that is the 4th book in the Faithful and the Fallen series, so I'm buying those as I read them. I also have Brandon Sanderson. I do own the Stormlight Archive. I don't own Mistborn yet, so that one I don't have, but I do have Brandon Sanderson in my collection. I also have Michael Sullivan, which you can't see because he's just one shelf up from here. I don't own the series that was mentioned for Michael Sullivan. I own the Ryer Chronicles and the Ryer Revelations, but I have been adding his books to my collection. I also own the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin, and I do have Mark Lawrence on my shelves, just not the one that they mentioned. I also have Vita Nostra on my shelves, which that was one of the ones I was surprised with. I do also have Foundry Side on my shelves, so Robert Jackson Bennett does make the list for me. And I also have Joe Abercrombie. Oh, I also missed Catherine Addison, who wrote The Goblin Emperor. I do have that book on my shelves. I also have Piranesi here. And then Coraline is also on my shelves by Neil Gaiman. And then I did miss, I'm looking around on my shelves. I did miss Christopher Buehlman, which I don't have Between Two Fires, but I do own The Black Tongue Thief, and I do plan to own The Daughter's War. I also wanted to talk to you guys about some of the authors that did surprise me for making the list. Not that these authors don't deserve it, I was just a little shocked to see some of their names come up. One of them is Christopher Buehlman. I have really enjoyed The Black Tongue Thief. I really like his writing style. Now, I've only read the one book, but I do think that he has the potential of being a new favorite, and so I was excited to see Between Two Fires on the list because that has been one that has been recommended to me numerous times, and it's like top of my list from my backlist that I do need to get to. And then I was also surprised, as I said, to find Vita Nostra on the list because I do think it's such a weird book, and so I really didn't think that anyone would contemplate putting that on their top 10, but I was glad to see it there. I was also kind of surprised to see so many people nominate books from the Locked Tomb series, mainly because, I mean, I knew about it and I knew that several people that I am in contact with have enjoyed the series, but I guess I never really hear a lot about it. Like I haven't heard a ton of people chatting about it in a whole bunch of different channels. It seemed to be a very niche group of people that were talking about it at first. So I was happy. I was pleasantly surprised to see that as well. Some I was a little disappointed with, especially in the repeats. I was sad to see, and I understand, well, I don't actually because I haven't read the books, but Malazan was represented so many times. And I wish that there was a list that a publisher or a larger entity other than Reddit would put together where they would take out some of the repeats. Because obviously this list was not made to do like the top 100. It was individual people putting in their top 10. So we are going to have a lot of repeats. I think it would be fun to see a company that is large enough to, pull in a whole bunch of votes and then take out the repeats, obviously, to have a top 100 list. I think it would be fun. So seeing Malazan so many times, seeing George R.R. Martin so many times, I wasn't super happy with that, but I do understand it. The last thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is authors that I think should have made the list at least once. Because first off, I was surprised that Sanderson didn't make the list more than he did. Now, he was repeated, I think once, or let's see, The Way of Kings was repeated 3 times. And I think Mistborn wasn't repeated at all. So I was a little surprised to see that, although I was happy that we had, some diversity within the books. But I would have liked to have seen Robin Hobb represented somewhere because the Realm of the Elderlings is huge. And I mean, Robin Hobb's been writing in fantasy forever. So I was a little surprised that no one mentioned any of her books. I also would have liked to have seen V. Schwab. So, and I was kind of surprised, especially with the Darker Shades or the Shades of Magic series, that none of those were mentioned because I know that series is huge, rightfully so. And then this one is just kind of, it broke my heart a little bit. The T. Kingfisher wasn't on the list at all, which I think Kingfisher is a little bit new, at least to me. I know that's not at all true as far as like their backlist goes, but I do think that T. Kingfisher deserves to be on the list. And then another one that kind of surprised me is Chakraborty not being on the list at all. So those are the ones that I was a little bummed that didn't make it. So those are my reactions and my stats for you guys for this list. This list that I've just kind of made up off the, off of this Reddit article, or not even, it's not even an article, it's just a question that people were talking about. But I think this has been fun. Let me know if you guys would be interested. I'm not going to do a top 100 because that's insane. But if you guys would like to see my top 10 fantasy books of the 21st century, I would do that. But it would probably take me a minute to narrow things down. And yeah, it's a little bit of a daunting task, but if you guys would like to see that, I think I'd be interested in making my own list and see if you guys agree with me. Let me know if there are any books that didn't make the list that you think deserve a spot in the top 100 fantasy books of the 21st century. I would love to see what books you guys would add. And if you aren't feeling chatty, just leave me something fantasy-esque. So it could be a dragon, a magical wand, whatever you guys want, just to let me know that you are here. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.